powerful. Yeah, sorry, my office slash studio is a bit of a mess. I wasn't really planning on making a video today, but I just have some interesting ideas about some news that I just heard. Um, so for anybody who knows me, knows that I got my software background. At the beginning, I started off with game development. That's kind of what got me into software development in general. So I have built games in the past. I actually had a job where I was building educational games for a while, which was amazing. And I actually had a top trending app in the Android marketplace way back in the day. So that was pretty cool. But anyways, all that aside, pretty much 90% of the content that I take in, as far as like podcasts and like news goes, is a lot of business related stuff, and I still kind of keep on the tabs of what's going on in the game development industry to some extent, right? So I just heard this news that Unity, which is a game engine, announced that they're making a pretty drastic change into the way they're handling their revenue split with game developers that are building games with the Unity game engine, right? So there used to be a bunch of different ways before, but before I believe it was a rev split. Once you reached like $200,000 or something like that, there was a rev split that kind of kicked in. And right now, what they're announcing is they're changing that to an on-install basis, right? So if you're building a game within Unity and you hit these different thresholds that they have, then they're gonna want money per install. So per anyone who installs your game, they're gonna want money for that. Not necessarily if they bought it, but if they installed it once you hit one of these tiers, right? And right now, a lot of people are kind of losing their minds over like, oh, this is crazy. I can't believe they're doing this. But I think there's three different scenarios. I'm gonna, if the camera, get the three fingers just so I don't look like a dummy holding up two fingers. I think there's about three different scenarios, and I think two of them not a lot of people are talking about. So again, just keep in mind, I do have a background in game development, and I also, sorry, I just had to check something on my phone. Sorry, I do have a background in game development, and I am pretty entrepreneurial, I would say, right? Like I've started multiple business, and I do listen to a lot of business podcasts, and I have again, I wouldn't say I'm not a bazillionaire or anything, but I wouldn't say I'm a complete dummy when it comes to, understanding the business side of certain industries. So anyways, all that aside, scenario number one, right, which is what everybody's talking about right now, which is some executive at Unity is so detached from the industry that they decided to make a monetization play on some random statistic that they saw, right? So they had some sort of boardroom meeting, right? And there was a bunch of charts, and one of the metrics on the chart says, oh, like you look at our number of installs of games using the Unity engine is super high. We want to use this metric to generate some revenue, right? And anybody who is making this decision with the goal to actually take revenue from that has to be pretty detached, right, from the industry to know that that's a bad idea, right? People are going to lose their minds if you try to make a play like that to try to bleed money from indie developers who don't have a lot of money to begin with, and to take money from a metric that's, for all intents and purposes, unpredictable, right? Like, because the original way that they're pitching it was per install. So if one person purchased your game, but then they uninstalled and reinstalled it 5 or 6 different times, that would be 5 or 6 different times that you would have to pay the Unity Corporation money to have that game in your marketplace. So you could see how in the long run, if you're selling a game one time for, let's say, $1, and over the course of several years, people are installing and uninstalling your game, how you could essentially run into a negative profit situation, right? So whoever's made that decision to honestly try to push that through is either very detached from the industry and, is not necessarily a good business person. And if that person does exist, anybody who's higher up at, Unity should probably, reevaluate who they have making decisions over there, right? But the two scenarios that I haven't heard anybody talk about, and again, I've listened to a couple of videos of people in the industry to kind of discussing this, is scenario number two, which is they have another monetization plan, which doesn't look that favorable, but they're putting the news out on this really terrible monetization plan in order for when they roll this back to something else, the common consensus is like, okay, well, at least they rolled back the really bad one. Like we have this one that's not very good, but at least it's not what they originally wanted. So, whew, thank God. Like that's, and then to kind of make people more at ease with another terrible monetization plan that's also bad, but they're going to try to make it look less bad in comparison, right? So that's kind of scenario number two. And then the third one, which I think this is probably a likely scenario, and I don't think I've heard anybody talk about this, and again, if I'm wrong, whatever, correct me in the comments, is I think, well, I don't know this for sure, but I do know that there is another company that bought a lot of shares of Unity a while back. There was some sort of merger or something, right? I don't remember the details on the company, but they were saying it's some sort of like adware company or something. Again, I could be wrong on the details of that, but if somebody at Unity who's an executive higher up or a major shareholder and they want to kind of take back controlling shares of their company at a lower price, what they could do is try to fabricate something that would lower the valuation of the company so that they could buy back shares at a lower price, right? And this is something you see a few people have done this stuff before. Like Elon Musk is one that allegedly did things like this before with when it came to Twitter and to Tesla and things, where he would say something publicly that would affect the stock price, and then he could purchase back more shares of his company in the hopes that it was going to make him more money in the future, or get controlling shares or whatever. There's a lot of reasons that you'd want to do that, but I think that's a possibility, right? Because I would imagine, I haven't checked yet, so again, maybe I'm going to look up the Unity share price in a minute, and then I'll find out that I'm completely wrong, and maybe in that case I won't put out this video, right? Because then I'll just look really dumb. But what's very possible is people that owned a lot of Unity shares, so like upper executives and controlling members of the company, could have potentially sold off a bunch of shares right now at a very high price, right? And then put an announcement like this out so that the share price drops, so they could buy back their shares at a lower valuation and then pull back, this monetization play that they decided to push out, pull it all back, and now they literally just like sold a bunch of shares at, let's say, $10, bought them back at $5, kept that difference, watched the share price go back up again, and they kind of pulled a fast one, right, to make a little bit of money. Alternatively, they could be doing this to buy controlling shares back of their company if they did sell off a lot of shares, like more than they're comfortable with or more than they want to lose. And they're using this as a play to plummet their share price just so they can kind of reacquire control, or just more shares in general at a lower price. That to me seems like it would make sense, right? Because I do know there's rumors of executives in companies like Unity that are kind of like, they're just generic executives, right? Like there are these people that were executives at like a car company before or something, and now they're kind of getting into game development, and then they're seeing these trends of like, and they're trying to use keywords like reoccurring revenue, and they're trying to just look at the metrics and just try to figure out ways that they can make more money for the company so that they, their position looks good. Like, look, I was CEO of this company, and within being there, I made 2 decisions, and now all of a sudden the company's revenue's tripled, right? Like everybody's kind of looking to do that. So that could be the case. But again, I think the thing people aren't really talking about is the fact that this could be a way for those guys. And again, somebody who's smarter than me can look this up and see if there's anybody at Unity that literally just sold a ton of their shares and watch the share price go down, and when it kind of bottoms out, watch kind of who buys them back, right? or anybody who's involved in making that decision and kind of pushing it to the public. But I think that's, scenario number 2 and 3, in my opinion, are the most likely, which I don't hear anybody talking about right now. But anyways, yeah, sorry for the ramble. I just, again, I thought this was very interesting, so I kind of thought I would give my 2 cents on it. Not saying that I'm particularly qualified to talk about it, which I'm probably not, but yeah, thought it was interesting. Stay powerful.